The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the producers and the individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the staff of the Sun Prairie Media Center, its members or underwriters, the board members of the Media Center Commission, Charter Communications, TDS Telecom, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit. The man seated next to me was just dressed as Baby New Year. His name is Mike Roth.
It doesn't take much. You just take off the clothes. That's pretty much it. Babies are born like that. Sometimes they have top hats. Very rare.
Yeah.
Very rare.
Sometimes a sash, maybe?
Maybe an umbilical cord?
Oh.
Yeah, that's kind of sassy.
Yeah. Throw that over the shoulder. Oh, man. So this week, we have a few movies to talk about on the marquee, and we are also going to start our wrap-up of 2018 by looking back and what our biggest disappointments of the year were. So first, I'm going to start off with a film called Mary, Queen of Scots. From director Josie Rourke. It is her debut film. Stars Saoirse Ronan as Mary Stuart, Margot Robbie as Queen Elizabeth I. And Mary Stuart was the Queen of France at the age of 16, was widowed at 18, and as this movie opens, she's returning home to her native Scotland to claim her rightful throne as the Queen of Scotland. Unfortunately, Scotland currently falls under the rule of her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. And so Mary refuses to be subjugated by her cousin and kind of forces her claim as not only the Queen of Scotland, but also as the Queen of England. She says, I'm going to be queen of everything that I see.
Isn't that how the monarchies usually are?
Usually is, yeah. And both young queens are really manipulated and treated as pawns by the men who are supposed to be serving them. Both of them, it's this whole movie is really a tale of watching how men just manipulate, how they're threatened by them, and they have to kind of use them to get themselves back into power. There's no way we can have a woman leading us. Of course, Mary just pushes back against all of this, and life gets very tough for her. She's forced in marriages of convenience, forced into trying to have a child by a man who she doesn't love, just so that the child will be the next rightful heir to the throne of England. And Elizabeth kind of leans into the system. It becomes more like the face of the power and the face of the system. And at one point she says, I'm more man than anything now. They've kind of made me what they want me to be. And Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie are great in this movie as two young royals who kind of take separate paths, use different techniques and strategies to kind of remain in power despite the male-dominated system that kind of wants them out. The movie's kind of dry. And outside of Ronan and Robbie, a lot of the other actors are kind of really relegated to just background fodder. They're real kind of just caricatures of, the people they would portray. So it's really built on the back of them. And really, Margot Robbie isn't in the movie a whole ton either. It is Saoirse Ronan's film, for better or for worse. And so it's an interesting film. It's a nice period piece. It's not anything spectacular, but I think good performances. And so I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Some of the makeup and hairstyle kind of reminds me of Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland.
Well, you can see where he got inspired. The young Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. What's the next movie we have, sir?
Well, I have one of the last comedies of the year. We got Holmes and Watson. This is another Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly film. This time it takes place as Will Ferrell is Holmes and his best friend is Watson. They are unraveling crimes, but that's really not the point of this movie. The point of this movie is to just be extremely silly throughout the entire film. They often reference current pop culture. It kind of reminds me a lot of like scary movies or those movies that just do this is an epic thing, and they just borrow from a bunch of things and try to spoof it. They do a lot of spoofing of Sherlock Holmes and other people's interpretation of Sherlock Holmes to the point where it almost becomes dull and predictable. This movie is getting horrible reviews, horrible. This was originally tried to be sold to Netflix, but it was so bad.
They said, no, thank you.
Netflix said, no, we're not going to take it. And that is absolutely terrible. I didn't think it was that bad. It is not a good movie by any means, but if you are looking for those highly spoofed, crazy comedies, we don't get much of them, maybe once a year or something like that. They never do well. I think, last year we had one that was done on 50 Shades that was absolutely miserable.
Oh, yeah, you went and saw that one, yeah.
And it's kind of the same vein. Some of the stuff is funny. Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly are a great couple when it comes to comedy, but this movie was not good.
It wasn't good, and it's unfortunate because, I mean, besides John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, you got Ralph Fiennes in here, as Moriarty. I like Lauren Lapkus and Rebecca Hall, who are the female foils for them.
Yeah.
But the movie just wasn't funny to me. And it kind of went repeatedly after the same unfunny jokes. And kind of also, it spoofed the Robert Downey Jr. Guy Ritchie films. I think the biggest problem for me is I just don't remember any laughs I had in the movie. There was one, when I went to see it, there was one lady who was overserved at the bar that was really enjoying it.
That would actually make this movie a lot better.
I think it would.
I mean, really, as far as the story, it's pretty bad. But slapstick and drinking kind of goes hand in hand. If you ever see any of those little clips on YouTube, it's usually someone saying, "Hold my beer," drinking slapstick.
This is true. What did you end up giving old Holmes and Watson?
I give it a 2. It probably deserves a little less, but I did chuckle a couple of times, and I didn't think it was as horrid as everybody else was saying.
Okay, all right. You know what was interesting to me is seeing John C. Reilly in here, and Steve Coogan was also in here, because they also star in Stan and Ollie, which we're waiting to come out. It's kind of nice to see. I'm like, oh, these guys are just working back to back overseas.
Actually, I got a question for you. Will Ferrell, wasn't he the executive producer of one of the other movies, Vice?
Yes, he was. Because of Adam McKay, his relationship with Adam McKay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just found it weird that he would have one that's getting rated really good.
Yeah, that's just because of him and McKay, because McKay moved on from the slapstick stuff to more serious fare recently. But I ended up giving Holmes and Watson 1.5 stars. Yeah, I didn't love it.
Wah, wah.
Wah, wah. All right, moving on, though. It's a movie you just mentioned, Vice, from writer-director Adam McKay, stars Christian Bale as Dick Cheney. This is the story of Dick Cheney and his rise to power. Also stars Amy Adams as his wife, Lynn Cheney. We have Steve Carell, who seems to be in every third movie right now. This time he plays Donald Rumsfeld. You have Sam Rockwell as George W. Bush, and Jesse Plemons is narrating this movie for us, explaining things. And it attempts to explain how Dick Cheney had a vision of extraordinary political power kind of early on and went from a massive screw-up in life to the power behind the scenes of multiple administrations. And this movie relies really heavily on Christian Bale's portrayal of Dick Cheney and the way he disappears into performances. Adam McKay as a filmmaker is interesting to me because with The Big Short a few years ago, he kind of came out of nowhere, coming from the Will Ferrell slapstick movies to a movie where he sat down and used really interesting techniques to explain really complicated things about the money and housing crisis, and really broke it down well. In this movie, he does that too. It didn't quite work the same for me. And a lot of it is because I think there's a lot of conjecture in the story about what really happened. And even at the beginning they say, we're not quite sure, but we're trying. But a lot of it is, if you're having a portrayal, you're trying to tell the honest story of somebody and honest conversations, but a lot of it is hinged on conversations that you would have no idea if those really happened or not. And that started to kind of bother me throughout this movie.
That was also something that was bothering me. I'm not a big fan of Dick Cheney, but you could tell this whole movie was set up just to tear apart anything about him. Throughout the movie, he was evil except for in a couple little areas. And then at the end, they found a way to even tear that down. And it's all based on hearsay or what you wish could happen in order to make your movie really good. I didn't think this was as informative as it was to just tear someone down.
I think it was a showcase of some performances, and there were some things in there that were obviously that they dug up and things like that. But there were, like I said, there were some moments in there that were really pivotal to portraying this character that I'm going, well, you wouldn't know that conversation between he and his wife in their bed. You wouldn't know that conversation at the kitchen table. That really hinges on who he is as a person.
Or how he betrayed his daughter.
Right. And so there was some of those that I kind of just felt uneasy about in this one.
As far as acting goes, I was amazed at Christian Bale. There is very little times where I could be like, that's Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for the majority of the time, I felt like this was Dick Cheney.
It was creepy.
And same thing with Sam Rockwell's portrayal of George Bush. Not, perfect, but still uncanny. It was really cool.
A lot of those, his George W. Bush, and even Steve Carell's Donald Rumsfeld, like, at first, at first glance, I was like, these aren't working for me.
Yeah.
But they picked up nuances of the characters that throughout the movie started to, okay, he's starting to disappear into it.
Yeah.
Christian Bale stood out. I mean, I'll be surprised if he's not one of the leading contenders for Best Actor because of this performance. And it's just classic Christian Bale. Like, I'm just going to become this guy now.
Well, the only time I could say that was Christian Bale throughout the movie was when Christian Bale smiled.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever seen Dick Cheney smile. So when he smiles, I'm seeing Christian Bale.
But
that was the only time.
So many little nuances down. It was pretty crazy. One of the things I loved about this is there's a mid-movie credit sequence that I loved. I absolutely loved. And I had my friend who was there with me, he had left to go get some more popcorn, refill his soda in the middle of the movie. He leaves, and there's a moment where they're like, yep, and then the movie's over. And it started rolling credits, and I'm going, oh, please let him walk in right now and go, the movie's already over.
I thought some of the comedy of this was fantastic. A lot of this movie felt very dry, but with the same vein as Big Short, they segment a lot of these dry parts with breaking that third wall and saying,
and using Jesse Plemons to kind of break in every once in a while and be like, let me tell you something.
And as far as the narrating, I don't really like Jesse.
Yeah.
He's in everything. He
He
appears in everything, but I have not grown to really like him as an actor, just as a guy who is in a bunch of stuff.
He's gone from Fat Matt Damon to me when he was young. I was like, oh, that's a guy who just looks like Fat Matt Damon.
Yeah.
To now he's in literally everything, and I can take him or leave him.
Yeah.
I know I'm not in love with him, but I don't mind him. What did you end up giving Vice?
I gave it a 2.5. I figured I can't give it really an honest score because really it all depends on what political spectrum you're on. If you are very liberal, you're going to come out here and you'll be like, yes, they finally gave Dick Cheney a bad time. If you're on the conservative side, you're going to be like, oh, this was not fair at all. Yeah. So I'm going to be in the middle. I can't really say this is going to work for everybody.
Excellent. I gave it 3.5 just on the strength of the performances and some interesting editing techniques. But I have issues with how this movie was done, so I can't give it a glowing review.
There we go.
Let's move ahead, sir, though, and take a look back.
Other glowing reviews?
Yes, other glowing reviews. Let's take a look back on 2018. We saw a ton of movies. We reviewed a load of movies. And, they weren't all great. But we're not talking today necessarily about the really bad movies. What's more damning to me is the disappointments.
Yeah.
A movie that has me thinking it's going to be good, and it's terrible. And some of these movies on our list were on our most anticipated list at the beginning of the year, and are ending up on the biggest disappointment list. That's harsh. So we are here to talk about our 5 biggest disappointments of 2018. And I want you to start it off, sir.
Well, I got an honorable mention.
Okay.
This movie was not a disappointment, but it was a disappointment. Solo, the Star Wars story, had a budget of $300,000 and cumulative worldwide.
$300 million.
$300 million. Cumulative made $392 million. And a lot of the disappointment, I believe, came from the lack of advertising, the poor quality of a lot of people who call themselves Star Wars fans banning the movie.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Very low buzz, but this movie was fantastic, and it deserved to make a lot more money. And because of how people acted and how people dropped the ball on getting this movie out to the public, it ended up failing, and that's what is one of my biggest disappointments.
This pen doesn't work, by the way.
But we're going to roll right into a movie that was actually disappointed for me. And this is my number 5, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which is the 3rd biggest movie of the year.
Yeah.
And again, disappointed with all the fans of this because this should not have made this much money. It was $1,304 million.
That's a lot of numbers.
That is a lot of numbers. And this movie is not good. This is like one of the worst of the Jurassic Park movies.
Yeah.
And it is making more money than anything else out there. All these great movies, this is a subpar movie, and they're going to keep on making it.
It was a big old stinker.
A huge stinker.
Yeah.
So, disappointment. Fans all around. What about you?
Yeah, my number 5 was a movie that we saw earlier this year, and there was a documentary that came out about this, and there's a lot of hubbub about it, and it had a cast that I really enjoyed, and it was Winchester.
Yeah.
A movie about the true story. The Winchester house is a really incredible story, really cool stuff. We got Helen Mirren in here as the widow. I love it. Let's do this. Movie comes out. They decide to make it a movie about a fictional doctor who's staying there and how the house, played by Jason Clarke, and really centered around him instead of the widow or the house itself. And I found it completely boring.
Yeah.
And completely disappointing.
I completely agree.
Yeah. No good. Winchester. Don't see it.
In the same vein, my 4, Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to it. Bringing back Tomb Raider. Alicia Vikander is one of my favorite actresses. I was excited to see this, and instead it was just another one of those movies that fell into the pitfall of, everybody loves watching puzzles on the game, so of course it's going to translate perfectly to screen. It never does. The games are in the games, so people are interactive. When people go to the movie theaters, they want the feeling and they want the story of the game, not color codes and finding kind of quests.
I agree with you 100% on that one, because I was actually really excited for it, because I like the Tomb Raider games, I like the Tomb Raider movies, I love Alicia Vikander.
Yeah.
And all those things didn't all add up to something that worked for me.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
My number 4 was a film that came out about a year ago this time. Huge buzz to it because it got a commercial during the Super Bowl saying, hey, this movie is going to come out. We knew it was going to come out at some point, maybe even the theater. Then we find out it's going to be a Netflix film. And then during the Super Bowl, they say, as soon as the game's over, you can watch it. It's going to be on Netflix. The internet explodes.
Yeah.
And we all rushed to go watch The Cloverfield Paradox because the first 2 movies have been different and equally great.
Yeah.
Third one, it's got to be.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
No.
And it ended up being this kind of low-level retelling of your basic sci-fi film that we've seen a bunch of times, trying to recapture. I mean, we saw Life a year ago. That was a better version of this.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even that good.
No. Actually, I love Life.
Life was fine,
good.
but I mean, Life was trying to be Alien.
I wanted Life to be the beginning of Venom when I first saw it.
And unfortunately, the things they tried in the Cloverfield Paradox did not work. And you have the name Cloverfield attached to it, and it seemed to tarnish that to me. And like, how dare you? So that's why it is my number 4.
It is also my number 3. I liked the movie. I thought it was all right, but Cloverfield is a really high bar, and this came nowhere close to that high bar. This movie is pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
The other 2 movies, no way you can forget them. They are fantastic. So, in turn, I had all that hype. I loved how they advertised it and got everybody to go see it.
Genius.
They had memes afterwards of like J.J. Abrams actually making the movie and bringing it to people's homes. Because no way it could have been any quicker than this, or more of a surprise. But it wasn't. It didn't live up to what I gave it for hype, and therefore it became a disappointment.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm curious to see how the next Cloverfield movie is going to be presented to us, because I think they really felt the pushback on it. Like, that's great. Your marketing was great. Make a better movie.
Hopefully, maybe next time they'll take a step back and just say, all right, 5 years from now, we're going to work on this. It's going to be good.
There you go.
We're going to give you plenty of time to think about it.
Yeah. My number 3 is a film that we talked about just recently. And that was a film that was supposed to have amazing visuals from the mind of Peter Jackson. We have Mortal Engines as my number 3, a movie that at the time I said might be my least favorite movie of the year. And a lot of that came down to because I was so disappointed in it, because I was expecting a lot in what they could do and what was promised in the trailers, and what I ended up getting was nowhere near what I was hoping for.
I think when we did our top 10, this was part of my top 10
I think
list.
it was.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know. It fell apart all over the place, and I was incredibly disappointed by Mortal Engines. So that's why it is my number 3 most disappointing film.
My number 2?
Yes.
The Meg. I was so looking forward to this movie. The commercials were awesome. They looked funny. It looked fun. You had Jason Statham kicking shark butt. I could have sworn this was going to be the new Piranha, and I really liked Piranha. I like those fun little horror movies. This was not fun. It felt long, and it felt too Statham. It was just boring, and that is not what I want out of a fun horror action monster movie.
Shark film. See, I love The Meg.
You did?
I did. I really enjoy The Meg. Like, I've watched it again since.
Really?
I enjoy The Meg. Yeah, it did not disappoint. It disappointed a little bit because I was expecting, like, we got to put a movie that's second to Jaws.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. But I enjoyed it. I'm a sucker for these.
I got bored.
Oh,
man. I think I even might have fell asleep for a while in this.
How dare you.
Ah.
I like The Meg. What I don't like is my number 2 movie. And this one, it wasn't necessarily terrible. It was just incredibly disappointing. It was in my top 10 most anticipated movies because it was taking a property that I loved and a director that was a part of that original project. And I thought, this is going to be great. It's all things together. We have The Predator is coming back.
Yeah.
Shane Black is behind the helm. He was in the original one. He loves this property. It's got to be great. What I forgot was most of these Predators aren't great. And this is just a horribly up and down franchise. And what we got in The Predator was, to me, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of this Predator franchise. We need to just leave these alone for a while. It didn't find the tone of the Predator movie.
Yeah.
It was all over the place, putting that team together that was like half slapsticky and just, I did not like any of it. The visuals were cool in parts, but it wasn't a Predator movie for me.
Yeah, and the whole, hey, we're going to reboot some of this stuff too, gave you hope that they were going to really concentrate on making a good story so we can forget about all those bad ones.
Yeah,
but
didn't do that though.
No, it didn't.
Gave me a big old disappointment. So there you go. What's your number 1?
My number 1, I'm sorry to say it was Venom. I was really looking forward to this movie. You had Tom Hardy, who is fantastic. You have Venom, who is a fantastic anti-hero.
Right.
The stories alone from the comic book are fantastic, and they really didn't...
they were kind of hamstrung
in
introducing a character without a vital part of his introduction.
You need Spider-Man, but I kind of figured with good writing, you could get around that.
There's the key, though.
Like I said earlier, with About Life, I'm like, Life would have made a great beginner for a Venom movie.
Yeah.
You just had to have good writers. And again, they didn't go with good writers. They went with a good formula, which didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And therefore, it became a disappointment. It's not a terrible movie, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, both of us talked about this a year ago. Like, Venom, I hope it's great. We love Tom Hardy.
Yeah,
we love the character.
I think it was on both of our top 10
I think it might have been,
yeah.
It was, and I agree. I don't think it's bad. I think one of the best parts about it is it's short. For a superhero movie, it clocks in at like an hour and a half. It's not one of these 2 hours and 20-minute deals, because that would have been unbearable. Because they just didn't have enough to do with them.
At the end, I felt like I wanted a little bit more story, so I'm primed for the next Venom when they make it, and they will make it, because it made a lot of money.
It made a ton of money.
But I didn't want this movie to be the Venom movie.
Big old disappointment. My number 1 is a film that I talked about, I think, last week in detail, so I'm not going to rant and rave too much about it, but it was my number 1 most anticipated film of 2018, and it turns out to land on the wrong side of the most disappointing films list. It's tough when it goes from number 1 to the other side, but it is Welcome to Marwen. Welcome to Marwen. I had the highest of highest hopes for this movie, and not only did it disappoint, but it was just, I think, out and out bad. It was disappointing because it betrayed the source material, and it was just bad. And if you want to hear me kind of rap on this movie more, we talked about it, I think, the last episode.
Yeah.
But it was a stinker, and I'm disappointed.
Yeah, it kind of stinks when our top 10 movies don't even come out, or they're very disappointing. And a lot of our top 10s...
Yeah, we are still missing some.
Yeah, I'm missing Battle Angel.
Alita, yeah. I'm missing The Irishman, which still hasn't come out. Yeah, there's a couple. Now, there were some bad movies we saw this year, and we kind of just want to pick one, like the worst movie that you saw this year. And I'm curious because I managed to dodge a few really bad movies and kind of sent you off to a couple of them.
And I took them. I took them.
What was your single worst movie of the year?
Hands down, not even argument. 50 Shades Free. It's not my biggest disappointment because the other two movies weren't good.
Yeah.
This one made those other ones look kind of good. This was the worst movie, hands down, all year round. Not cool.
Yeah. I'm glad you saw that.
What was yours?
I was surprised when I was putting my list together. I didn't have the usual amount of really terrible movies that I hated. I think I dodged a couple. And I don't think there were a whole slew of really awful movies this year. There were some bad ones nonetheless, though. I was kind of torn between I Feel Pretty, the Amy Schumer movie. Yeah. That was really bad. Robin Hood. That was really bad.
That was pretty bad.
I hated Death Wish. But the one I landed on was Clint Eastwood's film 1517 to Paris, the one where the story about the true heroes, and we get the actual guys who aren't actors to act, and we'll give them a ton of dialogue along the way.
We're going to, like the Clint Eastwood style, we're going to wash any color out of it and just repeat the same scenes.
And repeat it over and over, right? Boy, you're going to see that train blow up a bunch of times. Or, it's just going to be... It's going to be rough, and that movie was a stinker, and really led to me to believe that Clint Eastwood needs to hang it up. It's okay to just not do that anymore. So that's the worst movie of the year in my mind. Let's take a look ahead, sir. Speaking of movies coming out, and what's going to be coming soon, the weekend of January 11th. We have 2 movies on the marquee that week. The first one is called Replicas. It stars Keanu Reeves. He is a doctor who is bringing people's consciousness back from the dead, and he finds that he might be able to bring his dead family. He's like John Wick and a doctor. Like, his family's been killed. He might be able to bring them back, but there might be a real issue if he does. You've seen Flatliners. Things happen when you bring people back from the dead.
Actually, we just saw Flatliners. It was this year.
The other movie we have is The Upside, starring Bryan Cranston, Kevin Hart, Nicole Kidman. Bryan Cranston plays a man who is paralyzed from the waist down, and so Kevin Hart becomes his surrogate guy who helps him live life, and they learn from each other.
And that looks interesting. It looks like he's trying to break out of the mold of always being a comedian and try to be more of a serious actor. Yeah,
I'm actually surprised this comes out first week of January. I thought this would have been end of the year type stuff, kind of more serious stuff. But those are the movies that'll be coming out January 11th. Next week, we got a bunch of stuff. We're going to be looking back again at our favorite movies, the best movies in our mind of 2018. I'm excited for all that. Yeah. That's going to be a blast. Of course, before we leave you, we have to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters. The Palace here in Sun Prairie, you are amazing. Over the holidays, man, they were churning out movies and churning out popcorn. Oh, yeah. Busy times. Now's the time where you need to go and track down some of these movies because the Oscars are coming around soon, and they'll be releasing some of these movies back into theaters. I am looking forward to the horror movie that's opening up this week. Yes, we're going to be, Escape Room. Escape Room is our movie. I like the trailers, and so far, every year we have that first movie release is a horror movie. Everybody thinks it's going to be bad. It turns out to be decent. Not the best movie of the year, but it's not the worst of the horror movies. Right. And I like horror movies. Yeah. So. I'm hopeful for it. All right, there we go. It's all there we go. All I can be this time of year is just hopeful. Like Mike said, next week we're going to be reviewing Escape Room. We're going to be talking about our favorite movies of 2018. And if you want to find more from us, you can find us online, Facebook and Twitter, Real Reviews TV. Heck, if you want to email the show, Mike will read your emails live on the show. If you email realreviewssp@gmail.com. And I read everything exactly the way it is. Typos and all. Typos and everything. You're about to get it. So anyways, all that's coming next week. We have a bunch of stuff in January. Looking ahead at what's coming out in 2019. It's an exciting time. Yeah, can't wait. But until we meet again, I'm Jameson. I'm Mike Roth. Thanks for watching.